we're looking at someone that is applying the learning by making, not in a computer program, but actually in a robot. Sara Cosentino is coming from Araya in Tokyo and is trying to see if robots can have emotions. Thank you.
So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Sonia, for the invitation. I'm very pleased, if not extremely anxious of being here and meet with those incredible speakers. And I hope also my talk will be inspiring, at least a little bit. So, okay. I want to talk today about emotions, especially robotics emotions, and then try to establish a link between emotions and consciousness, possibly. So, first of all, why do we need emotional robots? What is affective computing about? It's all human-centered design. So we want robot to have emotion, to be able to express emotion, because this will render the user experience better. It will improve the user experience. It's all human related design. And what is a very important thing is that the emotions are not real. They're just simulated. They're just interfaces for us to feel better interacting with robots and have a pleasant experience. So this is our final objective. The idea is to have, I worked with humanoids, but this applies to any type of robot and also maybe virtual agents like ChatGPT. So we want the robot to express emotions, to be able to interact with humans at a conscious level, direct level, but also at an unconscious level to have a natural interaction. And so to do that, what we did as engineers, we took a human social interaction model developed by psychologists, and we analyzed what was happening there. So as you can see, an interacting actor goes through phases during the interaction. So first interprets what's happening, then puts what's happening into context in the whole situation, that forms some kind of ideas, and finally responds. And all of these involve two types of processes. One are cognitive processes that are usually conscious and usually explainable, and also emotional processes that are mostly unconscious, not always explainable. And the biggest problem and nightmare for engineers mostly is that those processes are not running in parallel, but they affect each other. So the final result of this is that we will have a direct feedback, kind of a conscious feedback, that will be affected by both cognitive processes and also emotional processes, and also the other way around. We have an emotional feedback that is also affected by cognitive process. For example, a person can decide to hide deliberately their emotion because it's not deemed appropriate for the particular context. So this is very difficult to model and implement on a robot. So we took a leaf from another theory, behaviorism, that says that it's not really true. You don't need to see what's happening inside, because emotions are just behavioral responses that are conditioned to past experiences and anyway environmental stimulus. So the point being that if I find the correct stimulus, I will get the response I want. So if we look, for example, at the basic emotions as somewhat agreed upon by psychologists, you can see that emotions are related with individual tendencies and also have a kind of social regulation effect. So for example, if I am happy, I tend to bond with other people. I tend to be to try with cooperate with other people. At the same time, I promote cooperation and social cohesion with other people. So, for example, if I build a happy robot, I want to have this kind of social regulation effect. And hopefully, so what we did, we implemented emotions in a robot and run some experiments to see whether this is actually true. So you can see our Cobian humanoid robot with basic emotions expressions, and this is totally, and this in a slightly more, let's see if it starts, yeah, slightly more complex. But the point being, were those experiments successful? Not really. We got some mixed results. And one point was, and it's been already talked about, it's nearly impossible to run ecological experiments with a robot that is taller than I am, and it weighs slightly less than I do, so this is also annoying, and in a lab. So another point, though, would be that we do not express emotions discretely, in a discrete fashion. So what we do is, during an interaction, we continuously express some kind of emotion. And this might be partially due to our mirror neuron system, that basically, the basic idea is that the brain simulates what it sees happening to at least get a perspective and an understanding of what the other person might be thinking. And so our robots do not do that. They just express some emotion and hope for the best, so basically. So what we did, we tried to implement a mirror neuron system in the robot to see whether this would improve the final interaction. And again, we got very mixed results, mostly in very, stage context. So, for example, in the context of greeting, the robot was really perceived well because it was capable of adapting real time to what was happening, completely mirroring the other person. But in more free interaction, where, for example, the robot would mirror the posture of the person that was standing here, or also go closer or remove themselves a little bit, this was not really well perceived. Actually, some people really preferred a static robot to this robot. And this was really a problem for us, because we didn't know exactly what to do about that. So the problem is that we basically were falling inside the uncanny valley. I think many of you know what the uncanny valley is, but the basic concept is that whatever we meet, that the more it seems like a human, the more we like it, until this thing actually really looks like a human, but it's slightly off, and so we have a very strong aversive reaction and a very deep sense of discomfort. And so for us, it's quite difficult, until now, to cross this bridge and actually have a very natural emotional interaction with robots. And so what happens is that, as we said before, emotions are just simulated in robotics. They are not real emotions, so the robot does not know what's happening on the other side. And so what we needed to do was to delve inside what emotions really are and how they're built, why they are there. And an interesting thing is that the body is key to emotional, to the emotions. So emotions are thought to have developed to protect the body. It's a mechanism of protection. And one important fact is also that emotion is a complex interaction of the body and the mind. So when we feel an emotion, our body changes. There has some physiological changes in the body that prepare the body for future action. And so this is quite useful for us because as humans, actually, we are guessing other people's emotions all the time. We are pretty good at it until you are, for example, a Western person in Japan, where you can't read any facial expression anyway. So this will become very difficult. But as robots, we can leverage different types of sensing. So if ever we can actually see what's going on inside the human body during the interaction using robotic sensing, then maybe we would be able to build a slightly more precise physiological image of emotions. So my work is actually on this, and the idea is to have something that can be used in robotics to, I wouldn't say very precisely or super correctly recognize emotion, but at least differentiate between emotions and especially tailor, understand the person the robot is interacting with changes, emotional changes. The point is that there is no system that allows us yet as engineers to collect many physiological data synchronized on a person, because these systems, I'm very engineer technical here, these systems developed for many different reasons. So for example, they developed for clinical reasons, so it's like closed clinical system. For research reasons, and they are basically impossible to use in an ecological fashion, or for user experience reason, and so you have a very limited amount of sensors. So what I am working now at the moment at Arayam is to build a platform that can support currently available sensors, synchronize the acquisition, and then use the data to interact with robots. Specifically in the project we are now, the idea is to use those sensors to allow the user to control avatars, either robotics or digital avatars. But my dream, of course, is to use also this system to build an emotional, a physiological image of emotion. And so why didn't we arrive till here? So what is something I found quite interesting in my quest for understanding emotion was that it's been thought for a while now that emotions are not just responses to stimuli, but they are actively constructed prediction that change depending on the body internal state. So they are some kind of there is some kind of mediation between external perception of the environment, and proprioception, perception of the inside of the body. So what also consciousness has been studied, or I wouldn't say defined here, but anyway, Nagel said that an organism has conscious mental state if and only if there is something that it is like to be that specific organism. Not I am a human, but I am Sarah. I am here. I live in Japan. And so this is my essence. And one other thing that is interesting about consciousness is that it is said to be the feeling that is related to the very act of experiences of sensing the world. And so also subjective experiences arise from the fact that there is some internal representation of the self that is completely integrated, which means you do not have sensory experiences that are all uncorrelated with each other and they go around by themselves and they are processed singularly, not with perception, so not with external stimuli, not with internal stimuli. You have all those perceptions together, you analyze together, you compare them or against a model of yourself, and you have the final experience. And so what is a robot at the moment? The robot has many senses. They're usually used one by one, they process one by one, and all the processing of the robots run in parallel. They are disjointed. If there are some internal sensors like joint measurement, they're used for motion, and this is it. If there is some temperature sensor, internal temperature sensor to see whether the chips are overheating, they're processing separately. There is no consciousness there. There is not an integrated model of the robot itself. So what happens if we use our general platform instead we implant it in a robot, we connect it to some kind of integrated processing unit that is adaptive and it can change in time. And then all the processing of the robot, both the external processes and the internal processes, the internal sensors, are processed in an integrated way by this processing unit. I think we can somehow simulate what is consciousness, or at least the emotional parts of consciousness in a robot. And we can use this, hopefully, to simulate different situations and maybe study consciousness, embodied consciousness with robots, and see whether this is possible or not. And so that's basically the end of my talk. And thank you very much for listening.